Many believe life as we know it has changed irrevocably, and that in this seismic shift lies an opportunity to turn things around, improve our world, and make life better for the majority, especially in poor countries. It is time to reboot Nigeria. I am Nabila Usman, sitting in for Kadria Ahmed. This is Pivotal. On the 7th of August, an oil supertanker, MV Heroic Idun, laden with 3 million barrels of crude oil from Nigeria, was intercepted in Equatorial Guinea. The ship was seized by the Equatorial Guinea Navy with the aid of intelligence from the Nigerian Navy after the 300,000 metric ton vessel escaped from its forces. This is not an isolated case of large-scale oil theft. Information available shows that this level of theft has occurred at different periods in the country. In 2019, the Nigeria Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, NEITI, released a report which showed that crude oil and refined products worth $41.9 billion have been stolen from Nigeria in the last 10 years. In 2021, there were also a series of reports of escalating oil theft by criminals. Recently, security agents operating across the country reported the recovery of stolen crude oil valued at 86.2 billion naira in August alone. According to the head of the Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission, Mr. Benga Komolafe, Nigeria lost $1 billion to crude oil theft in the first quarter of 2022. Why has Nigeria continued to experience oil theft? How serious is the problem? And what is the impact on the nation? To answer these questions and more, I am joined by a registered petroleum engineer, Engineer Martin Onovo, and former chairman of the Board of Trustees, Society of Petroleum Engineers, Engineer Alex Ney. It's good to have you.
Thank you very much.
So we'll start off this conversation with you, Engineer Ney. Has oil theft in Nigeria become organized to the point that it can be described as a cartel?
Okay, the first oil theft I experienced was 1983. And I took a helicopter. I was going on time off. I took a helicopter and flew across to Madahu. From there, followed the pipeline up to the refinery. And I saw 3 different spots where you have tankers at a distance and you can see cuts all along. So it's a syndicate thing. The reason why I say that is, if we're pumping oil from Escravos to Warri Refinery, the only person that will be aware of it will be the refinery people and we in Chevron. So if they tell us we need 300,000 barrels, we pump 300,000 barrels to them. I'm sure somewhere along the line, they inform these guys that the line is open. So they open their own valve and fill their tanks. But the pressure drop between the 2 places is a clear indication of oil disappearing, and nobody cared. When you pump 300,000, you ask the refinery, they will tell you they get 300,000. That was the first shock I had, because there are losses due to frictional forces, and there was no loss. So it's a syndicate thing. And to take a barrel of oil from this country out to the tanker, if you know the processes, you will know it's a syndicate thing. You have the Navy on the sea, you have customs, you have government regulators at the terminals and all that. So if anything happens, somebody somewhere along the line knows what is going on. But the present situation we find ourselves is very, very disgraceful, that a country that rewards violence, promote violence, and I've said this over and over. Somebody said he fought. You decide to give the person 65,000 naira a month as ex-militant. Then somebody took the pain to go to the university, graduate. You take him as a youth corps and pay him 18,000. So what are you saying?
So Engineer Ney raises quite a few important points, and Engineer Onova, I'd like to bring you into the conversation now. With more than 60 years of independence, why do you think we've been unable to essentially put a pin in oil theft?
Well, I can tell you that this oil theft has only come to this degree in this Fourth Republic. That's very clear. Not done by one person or by one syndicate, because the illegal refineries also do oil theft. They steal for their, I don't like to call them illegal refineries because they cannot be technically called refineries. So they are just pollution plants. But because everybody calls them illegal refineries, they're simply pollution plants. That's what they are. So, but because everybody calls them illegal refineries, that's why I will call them illegal refineries. So these illegal refineries also steal crude. So that's part of the crude oil theft. But then there is this larger, bigger international syndicate that steals for export, like the case of the 3 million supertanker that was arrested in Equatorial Guinea. Now, if you know what 3 million barrels represents, you will know it is impossible to steal this crude without everybody knowing. Your typical water drum or the engine oil drum, that's slightly over a barrel. A barrel is 59 liters, 159 liters, sorry. So that's slightly over a barrel, which actually is 42 US gallons if you're doing 3.86 liters per gallon. So when you look at that 3 million times, that is what is 3 million barrels. That's how humongous the quantity is. So it's not something you put in a pocket. It's not something you put in the trunk of a car. Now, these super tankers are bigger than houses. So, like Engineer Ney has said, you can see them. The Navy can see them. The Air Force can see them. Everybody can see them. The barges that load on the coasts and go to transload into these tankers, they are not small. You see them, the same kind of barges that carry vehicles. So it's a refusal to act. And that's why it's a big syndicate, and that's why you will presume, even without the official statements we're getting now, either connivance or indolence. But indolence won't apply. It has to be connivance. Because the government itself is directly affected, because this is government revenue. Because I don't know why a ruling party will be in office, unable to pay ASU on terms that have been previously agreed, and yet disregard such revenue losses. I mean, from the data you published at with your introduction, this is $4 billion lost every year. And to the best of my knowledge, $500 million will solve all the ASU problems and even more. But so why will a government ignore this?
So at this point, I'd like to go back to Engineer Ney. You know, in public conversations, there's been a lot of discussions around the host communities and the possibility that either they look away or they are a part of the system of theft. Do you think that there is some blame to be accorded to the host communities?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, the people in the host community, they are not knowledgeable enough to carry out these operations, but they are just like hanger buyers you can use to do the dirty job. So the real people that own this business, they are the top guns of this nation. And those people, they are just like employees. If you go in there, you see them muddled up with crude oil all over their body and all that. They are just like hired laborers to do the job. So it's just few of them at certain level names you can say that are involved with the cartel to take the oil out. So the community, the host community people you see around, they are just like laborers helping them to carry out the operation. These real owners of these things, they are hidden somewhere, but the operation is carried out by they pick anybody. You see some Filipinos that they have been arrested and all that. Those are just employees of the system, but it's the cartel that is responsible. It's like a mafia group, and everybody have their share, and that's why I'm saying if the government wants to stop this stuff, they will be able to. because of the gains everybody's making out of it, nobody's doing, just making noise about it. And that the means also by which arms and ammunition comes into this country. Because those tankers are coming, they bring all the arms and small weapons, big weapons, whatever. Pick it up. How do you think all these weapons are available within the country and within the Niger Delta area? It's through such means. So if the government turn a blank eye to this operation, then the whole thing will continue. If they wake up and say they want to solve this problem, there are solutions. And we are saying it clearly that it is very easy to stop this mess if we want to. Let the Navy not compromise, let the Army not compromise, let the Air Force not compromise, and let the government be honest and say, look, we want this thing stopped. But the painful part of this whole thing to me is turning the Niger Delta into a violent place because you are rewarding violence.
So, Engineer May, you've started to raise an important point, and I'm hoping we will get to it in a moment. I'd like to come to you, Engineer Novo. I understand that much of the theft of Nigeria's oil is done at the onshore sites, despite the fact that I think about 50% of our production is offshore. We've also been unable to hit OPEC quotas that have been given to the country. What would our production be like if we were to tackle, if onshore production was actually at where it should be?
Well, we've been for many years trying to hit 2 million barrels. Of course, some years further back, we've been able to cross that mark. But on a sustainable basis, we've been doing 1.6, 1.8, near 2 million on a sustainable basis. So right now, the estimates we have is that 70 to 80% of that is stolen. And that is why we're talking about the enormous volumes that make it impossible. It's not 120-liter jerry can. That's not what we're talking about, that somebody puts in the trunk of his car. Let me give you an example. 42 inches is 3.5 feet. That is the size of one of the loading lines that I know in one of the major oil companies. That's how big the diameter of a pipe for loading. So these quantities are humongous. You cannot pump this volume without everybody seeing you. Now, if you're cycling with small barges, then you will need probably 1,000 barges to cycle to fill a super tanker. So how can you have 1,000 barges and the Navy cannot see you? Marine police cannot see you. Civil defense cannot see you. That's impossible. So that's why I say this thing is brazen, this thing is open. Engineer Nelly got on the helicopter and saw 3 tankers. Police has helicopters. Navy has helicopters. Why can they not get on the helicopters and see? So the only explanation, and that's why I agree with the SDP presidential candidate, it is government that is doing this. No, nobody else. Journalists don't have the capacity to do this. I'm a petroleum engineer. I've worked in Africa, I've worked in Europe, I've worked in the US. I don't have a capacity to do this.
And to what extent do the oil companies come into the mix?
Well, the oil companies, they are losing, but they can't enforce the law. A lot of these criminals are also armed, don't forget. And that's why you need law enforcement to counter them. It is the responsibility of government to enforce security. That is the fundamental responsibility of government. And we have a situation where government has failed to protect lives and property from terrorists and bandits and herdsmen. And then we have this situation where the major source of foreign exchange, which is crude oil export, has been fundamentally compromised in an import-dependent economy. This cannot continue.
At this point, we will go on a short break. You're still watching Pivotal. When we come back, the conversation continues. Welcome back. You're still watching Pivotal. My name is Nabila Usman. With me discussing the large scale of oil theft we're seeing in Nigeria today is a registered petroleum engineer, Engineer Martin Onovo, as well as the former chairman of the Board of Trustees, Society of Petroleum Engineers, Engineer Alex Ney. Now, Engineer Ney, earlier in the conversation, you started to talk about what justice looks like, and recently we've had the federal government come out to essentially defend their decision to contract someone who was largely known to be an oil militant, or as would we like to say, a Niger Delta militant. And he's been contracted to essentially secure oil infrastructure. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, you can remember I keep talking about when government recognize violence, then they promote violence. If you, as a government, decide to give such huge contract to somebody of that caliber, then most of the youth and men or human beings in the area will say, well, you have to be violent for you to be rewarded. All the programs the federal government has put up towards the Niger Delta, they are things that really induce violence and get the people out of focus. If the government is doing that, we as Niger Delta people, we have a responsibility. We have common sense to know that we are being destroyed. We have to make effort and make sure these type of actions are not implemented in our environment, because it takes two to tango. We are seeing the destruction it is to us. We are not that poor to the point that we are not thinking. All these strategic things that are being done, whether awarding contract and all that, is going to impoverish us. It will destroy the more, because the young men now, the role models they are looking at are the violent people.
So, Engineer Onovo, at this point, I would like to take you to the Petroleum Industry Act. It's one of those things that has made this sector receive quite a bit of praise, despite the negativity that we're seeing currently. Do you think that there's something in that act that gives us a better chance of securing oil infrastructure within the Niger Delta?
Well, you could have the act, and until you implement such, what does the act say for now? What the act says is, for communities that have oil infrastructure, they will benefit from what it calls the host community funds, which is supposed to be funded with, I think, 3% of the operations cost of the oil company in that domain. So, and you know that this is a new act until you reduce it to implementation, and we see the implementation. Because this is conceived to be for developmental purposes for those communities. And it is supposed to motivate the communities to ensure that these companies do better, so that that host community fund can have adequate funds to cater for their needs. So that does not connect directly to oil theft. Of course, indirectly it connects, but directly you have awarded this contract, which to me is abdication. You have civil defense, you have police, regular police, you have marine police, you have navy, you have air force, you have army. Then you need Tompolo to police your coast. The first question I will ask you, was there a pre-qualification? Did you define your needs and identify companies that can do that? Secondly, in the marine environment, is Tompolo a captain or a naval expert, or what is he? Or a marine engineer? So it's all the whole, okay, we've been exposed in our oil theft, let's replace it with a contract theft. That's what I think it is. This cannot be right. It's abdication. So we can't be doing these deceitful, in quote, remedies. We know what the problem is. We don't want to solve it. Then we create a false solution so that we perpetuate ultimately the same objective, which is directly to destroy the country, because that's what it is.
So, Engineer May, the Dangote Refinery is something that a lot of Nigerians, regular Nigerians, and the federal government all seem to be waiting for to come on stream. And I'm wondering if when the refinery comes on stream, it will set a standard for providing safety and protection for oil infrastructure, considering that we have a private investor in the person of Aliko Dangote. Do you think that protecting his interests will also be in the best interests of the federal government? Will it set a standard for our own national infrastructure?
Well, a businessman is a businessman. Definitely, the Dangote Refinery is not going to be like your NNPC refinery, because he's getting money to run. All that money you see going in there, they are not his personal money. So he must be up to speed to make sure the business is clean and fully operated for him to repay his bills and all that. People say government has no business in business, and it's very true. Look at Nigerian Airways. Look at all the things government owns. They are not business outfits. You want to fly to London those days, you just go, they give you a ticket, you fly to London. Who's giving account? So the Dangote Refinery is a business, and it's going to be a business. So there's no way you can compare it to a Nigerian NNPC refineries and all that. It's going to give its own standard. And remember, it is not mandatory. Dangote must put his oil or refined products in Nigeria. He's a businessman. He can have his arrangement whereby people come and lift his products. Remember, he is buying the crude and is putting it into the system. The illegal refineries, or whatever you call them, their economics is different because the crude is free. So they refine, whatever they get is all free money. If he's going to buy his crude, the normal rate, put it into his refinery, then his economics must jive, otherwise he's out of business. So it's going to be a different model. And that model is what is supposed to be. There are refineries outside this country, 100 years plus, they are still running. And I think Dangote and his group should be smart enough to make sure that it's not going to be the typical Nigerian way.
So, Engineer Novo, the question really is whether this privatization is a solution to the theft.
Privatization is not. And what Dangote did is not privatization. He built his own refinery. The Russian Gazprom is running. It runs world class, very efficient. It's government owned. Before the destruction of Libya, almost all the utility corporations were government owned and they were running world class. So if we choose to run our own down because of corruption and destroy it, we can't claim that that's an excuse to privatize public property. I see that differently. But can private enterprises like Dangote go and build their own refinery? Excellent. That ultimately helps us, because the waste of importation is phenomenal. That importation cost is well over 50% of the product cost. So if you look at your importation cost and look at the domestic supply options, the price will be less by over 50%. So in every way, once you do the right thing, the benefits multiply. Once you do the wrong things, the issues multiply. And that is why you must consistently do the right things.
Engineer May, I do wonder, if everything lies at the step of government and it seems like we're not getting anywhere, then truly, what is the solution to this issue?
Privatization of the refinery, Dangote Refinery, that is not a solution to the oil theft, because these are two separate compartments. The refinery, get the crude, refine. Theft, you take the oil somewhere, sell it, bust the pipe and whatever. So as far as I'm concerned, I think we'll talk extensively. Some people might get hot because of the discussion, but the fact remains. The Nigerian state has proved itself as a failure in terms of securing the people and their environment. Otherwise, why delegate such responsibilities to individuals? The oil companies, they are not here as security people. It is the government that should provide security for business to reign. And remember, most of the oil companies, almost 60% of them, they are owned by the federal government. So if any company decides to go and pay some money to make sure their operation goes on well, at the end of the day, the federal government still pays 60%. So who is fooling who? We have to wake up. The federal government should not relinquish their duties to any and anybody. So that's where we are.
So, Engineer Novo, if the federal government has the sole responsibility of protecting this national infrastructure and we're failing at it right now, how do we solve the problem?
It's very simple. The Constitution provides the answers to every scenario that you can imagine. But maybe we don't like constitutional answers. The government can be impeached. The government has a tenure of 4 years. The government can be voted out of office. So there are many options. There are many options.
So essentially the answer lies with changing the government?
Yes, you have to change a government that has failed. That's what you need to do. You're not going to kill the people. You're just going to let them go. Sorry, sir, you have failed. Go home, retire. Thank you very much. Then we get other people who can get the work done.
And on that note, we've come to the end of Pivotal. My guests have been registered petroleum engineer, Engineer Martin Onovo, and former chairman of the Board of Trustees, Society of Petroleum Engineers, Engineer Alex Ney. And we've just discussed the struggle with large-scale oil theft in Nigeria. That's Pivotal this month. Stay with us until the next time we come your ways.